It may not be out and out revisionist history, but there certainly seem to be a few attempts out there to massage the narrative or smooth the rough edges of Greece's Euro 2004 triumph. These days, you might be inclined to believe this was just your typical underdog story, a plucky David taking down European soccer's Goliath. It's a narrative that sells, it's also one that is entirely false. Most people at the time wanted to see this David get squashed like a bug. During the summer of 2004, as Greece progressed in the tournament, the public sentiment was firmly against Otto Rehhagel's negative brand of football. In sports history, this has to be one of the few, maybe the only underdog that was absolutely despised. And if you went back to soccer forums around this time, you would find loads of people critical of Greece, railing against them, and just hoping anyone would be able to stop them from winning. Well, there were a handful of folks out there like yours truly who were extolling the virtues of their defensive styles and trying to justify their counter-attacking precision. Look, I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I was such a soccer hipster 20 years ago, why I would try to defend the undefendable. Somewhere on the internet out there is a 1,500 word post where I explain why Craig Bellamy is a better version of Samuel Eto'o. You know, Bellamy was actually pretty good. No, we are not doing that. The point is, Greece was a Cinderella that everyone wanted to see remain single and stuck in indentured servitude. Of course, that did not happen, and against all odds, Hellas would win Euro 2004. I'm Cheyenne Hollis, this is The Touchback, and today we have the story of Toe Piratico, the underdog everyone absolutely despised.
It's over! It is over! Greece are the champions of Europe, the ultimate outsiders.
As Greece would head into Euro 2004 qualifying, they weren't exactly riding a huge wave of momentum. The 2002 World Cup qualifying campaign did not go all of that well for them. However, it was during this time they hired Otto Rehhagel to try and turn the ship around. The German had a legendary 14-year stint with Werder Bremen, would go on to flame out spectacularly at Bayern Munich, and then stuck it to them by winning the Bundesliga with FC Kaiserslautern. Things there ended really messy. He would be fired in 2000 and had very little in the way of job prospects. Rehhagel would be out of soccer for nearly a year before Greece offered him the post at what was not a particularly attractive job at the time. Hellas hadn't won a game at a major tournament, the Euros and the World Cup, nor had they even scored a goal at one. There was a mountain that needed to be climbed. Rehhagel would spend the last couple of games of Greece's 2002 World Cup qualifying campaign really just tinkering with things and trying to get a feel for the job, since the side was long out of contention. He also had a front row seat for that David Beckham free kick goal that turned what would have been a historic Greek upset into an all-time legendary moment for the England national team. When the Euro 2004 qualifying groups were drawn, not much was made of Group 6. You had Spain, who just about everyone thought would easily top the table here. And then you had four sides kind of there to make up the numbers in Ukraine, Armenia, Northern Ireland, and Greece. One of these sides would advance to the qualifying playoffs, with Ukraine being seen as sort of the favorite, the second best team in this group. However, most pundits didn't really foresee the group's second place team reaching the finals, barring a major upset. Now, there would be an upset coming from Group 6, but it would not take place in the qualifying playoffs. Euro 2004 qualifying did not get off to the best of starts for Greece. They lost their campaign opener in Athens to Spain 2-0, with Raul and Juan Valerón scoring the goals for the visitors. Things would get even worse in the team's second game, where they lost 2-0 to an Andrei Shevchenko-less Ukraine side in Kiev that left the Greeks bottom of the table in Group 6. At this point in time, Greece was playing a far different style than what they would eventually become known for. Rehhagel was really trying to instill some attacking elements, some faster pace elements into the team's strategy. This saw the Greeks create chances in their first two games. I mean, they had plenty of opportunities to score, but they didn't score, and that, of course, is a problem in soccer. It took them only 2 minutes in the next fixture to finally open their Euro 2004 qualifying account, with Demis Nikolaidis eventually scoring a classy brace in a 2-0 victory against Armenia. This, by the way, was not a particularly well-attended contest in Athens, and the Greek fans who did show up seemed more interested in playing with flares than what was happening on the pitch. Things really began coming together for Greece at this juncture. There was a comfortable victory over Northern Ireland, and then it was a rematch against Spain in Zaragoza. The Greek side here was missing a few starters due to injury and looked fairly overmatched for most of the first half. Then, sort of out of nowhere, Bolton Wanderers legend Stelios Yiannakopoulos produced a superb strike to give the visitors a lead. The second half was more of the same, Spain dominating the proceedings. They had a lion's share of possession, but were unable to get the ball past goalkeeper Antonias Nikopolidis. The Greeks would finish this match with 10 men, as Stelianos Venatidis received a red card with 10 minutes remaining. Spain, though, could still not find a way past Greece. This would become the blueprint for the Greeks moving forward. Organization, defensive effort, a lot of energy, and just a hope that somehow over the course of 90 minutes you would find a goal. One of the more interesting aspects of the system created by Otto Rehhagel for Greece was that defender Traianos Delis acted as a sweeper at the back, which allowed defenders to mark tighter than what most teams were used to. The strategy would become more refined and polished as the qualifying campaign proceeded, but this was what Greece was going to do to win games. At this point, Otto Rehhagel's side was on a roll and no one could stop them, no one could break them down. They won their final 3 Euro 2004 qualifying matches all by a scoreline of 1-0. This saw them finish at the top of Group 6 with 18 points, one ahead of Spain. Greece was going to their first European Championship since 1980. It was certainly a far cry from sitting bottom at their group table after 2 match days. This, though, is simply the start of the Greek story. Ahead of the Euro 2004 group draw, Greece was placed in pot 4 with the other lowest ranked teams at the time. In fact, the only side who was ranked lower than Greece heading into the tournament was Latvia. The Baltic country had never played in a major tournament and had only resumed fielding a team in 1992 after the fall of the Soviet Union. Greece did not have to wait around to find out which group they would be playing in. Portuguese legend Eusebio drew their ball first, meaning they would be in host Portugal's group, Group A. Because UEFA loves making these events unnecessarily complicated, a second ball was drawn after Greece was selected to determine what position in the group they would be. That would reveal A2, meaning the Greeks would play in the tournament's opening match against host Portugal. The camera would cut to Rehhagel after that second ball is drawn, and the coach does his best Jim impersonation, but we are still 5 years before the Jim is even a thing here. Anyway, eventually Spain and Russia would be drawn to join them in Group A. In the media, Greece was routinely predicted to finish last in that group, by the way, despite the fact they had been in Spain's qualifying group and finished ahead of them. Nobody thought that this side was capable of doing anything at the European Championships. When squads were announced a few weeks before the start of the tournament, Greece's consisted mostly of domestic league players, all of whom plied their trade at either Olympiakos, Panathinaikos, or AEK Athens in the Alpha Ethniki. There were 6 guys at various clubs around Europe, most notably was Delas, who was an accomplished defender at Roma. There was also midfielder Georgios Karagounis, who was on the roster at Inter Milan, but not exactly playing all that much. It's safe to say the consensus here was that Greece were proverbial lambs heading into the slaughter ahead of the Euro 2004 opener against host Portugal. Not only were they facing an entire country, Portugal had a ton to prove at this tournament. The pressure on Portugal was amped up by the fact this would be the last go-round for the country's so-called golden generation. Players like Luis Figo, Rui Costa, and Nuno Gomes were going to be playing in their last international tournament. Like all openers, this was a huge fixture. Estádio do Dragão was the venue, and well-known referee and Mr. Clean lookalike Pierluigi Collina was the lead official. What happened in this match was both shocking and a sign of things to come, even if no one knew it yet. Greece took an early lead thanks to a Karagounis strike that Ricardo really should have saved here. Rehhagel's side then spent the remainder of the first half basically just gumming up the works. Portugal did not get an inch of space for their attackers when they entered the final third. The second half began, and shortly thereafter Cristiano Ronaldo came in way too hot to give up a penalty. This was duly converted by Angelos Bassinas, and the rest of the second half played out, well, basically like you saw in the first half. Portugal took a bunch of harmless shots from outside the box in hopes something would happen. It never did, and Portugal had no counter to the defensive pressure Greece was applying. They were also more than happy just to sit back and block any available avenue Portugal could try to exploit. Ronaldo did grab a late consolation goal off a corner kick, but it was meaningless in the scheme of things. For Greece, not only had they scored their first goal at a major tournament, but they had their first 3 points in country history, a huge accomplishment. Next up was another match against their qualifying group mate Spain. Early on, and Ivan Helguera shows us why he was not an attacker. Here he is seemingly defending Greece's goal instead of directing this ball on target. Thankfully, Spain did find a way to get the ball to a striker in the box, with Fernando Morientes, fresh off a successful loan stint at Monaco, managing to break down the stubborn Greek defense. While some managers may have panicked at this moment in time, Rehhagel stuck to his guns and continued on with the Greek game plan. The team went out to stifle the Spanish attacks and just hoped they would score a goal somehow, some way at the other end. And what do you know? It worked. Angelos Charistias is hit with a long pass, and he nutmegged Iker Casillas to tie the game at 1. Spain had a few half chances as the second half progressed, but nothing particularly worrisome. I believe this game, especially in the second half, can best be summed up by this Greek fan in the stadium casually smoking a cigarette late in the second half. What can I say? Only in Europe. Greece headed into their final group stage game on 4 points, with Spain also on 4 points and Portugal with 3. With the latter two sides playing each other in the final group stage game, it meant Greece only needed a draw against Russia to advance to the quarterfinals. What preceded was perhaps the team's worst performance since Rehhagel took charge. Some of it had to do with tinkering. Rarely, if ever, did he start the same starting 11 in back-to-back matches. He was always making small adjustments he felt were necessary from a tactical standpoint. It also didn't help that Karagounis was suspended for this final group stage match. Whatever the case may be, the side looked uncharacteristically lethargic, allowing 2 really soft goals to Russia inside the first 20 minutes. The first was the fastest goal allowed in European Championship history at the time. Not exactly something you would expect from a side who was so well drilled defensively leading up to that moment. It should be noted that at that moment, after the second goal was conceded, Greece is out of the tournament. They were third in Group A behind Spain and Portugal in the table. Then, in the 43rd minute, Zisis Vrisas scored what would be the most important goal for Greece in the entire tournament. Without this goal, Greece would have finished behind Spain on goal differential. Spain went on to lose that match to Portugal 1-0, by the way. With the head-to-head result between Greece and Spain being a tie and the goal differential for both sides being 0, goals scored was used as the tiebreaker. With Greece's 4 being more than Spain's 2, it meant the Greeks advanced to the quarterfinals. But if that goal is not scored, Greece would have a worse goal differential. It would have been at -1, Spain would have been at 0, and Spain would advance to the quarterfinals at Greece's expense. Before we move on to their exploits in the knockout stage, let's talk about the general perception of Greece at this time after the group stage. Honestly, they were still somewhat of an afterthought even at this point in time. Their style of play wasn't fan-friendly, but there was a lot of bad football played across the board. Going into the quarterfinals, the assumption was Greece was a nice story, but there was no way in hell they were going to be able to knock off France. Hell, The Guardian even said it would take a miracle for them to progress. In hindsight, maybe that statement was a little foolish. Greece had proven everyone wrong. They proved them wrong in the qualifying stage of Euro 2004. They proved them wrong in the group stage. This team probably deserved a little more respect than it got. Not that it mattered to them though, because they were just going to go out and take that respect. France had won Euro 2000. They would go on to finish as runners-up in the 2006 World Cup. But that period in between those two moments, well, it wasn't exactly a vintage French side. They crashed out of World Cup 2002, finishing bottom of their group. And while they did finish top of Group B at Euro 2004, the performances here were not convincing. Manager Jacques Santini had one foot out the door. He was leaving after Euro 2004 regardless. Defensively, this French team was all over the shop. Marcel Desailly was certainly past his prime. William Gallas at right back at times during Euro 2004 was a choice, I suppose. France would come up against a Greek side that did not need a miracle, as The Guardian had proclaimed. Nope, all they needed to do was play their game. France had no desire to get into an arm wrestle and grind out a victory. To that end, on this day, I think it's safe to say Greece was the better team. It was not pretty, not by a long shot. I'm also inclined to believe this was a goal. That aside, this is the one match in Euro 2004 where I think you can truly argue Greece was well worth their victory. Instead, their win over France really rubbed people the wrong way. Look, as I said, Euro 2004 did not provide fans with a lot of entertainment or even moments to remember. But one thing everyone was looking forward to was a showdown between France and the Czech Republic. That was a matchup that was going to be a blockbuster. Greece, though, they took it away, and now it created some resentment towards them. Speaking of Czech Republic, they had become the tournament darlings. They had a whole host of legendary players: Pavel Nedved, Thomas Rosicky, Toljan Koller, and the like. In some ways, they were the anti-Greece. They were the top scoring team in the tournament and played with an almost reckless verve. For many fans, this was a battle of good and evil. It was the Rebel Alliance taking on the evil Empire. This time, though, the dark side, they had managed to put up a screen blocking that thermal exhaust port to the Death Star. Here's the deal. Who knows what happens if Pavel Nedved didn't get hurt and needed to be substituted in the first half? That definitely changed the dynamic of the contest. Other people love to point to the silver goal rule as another reason as how it was sort of unfair to the Czech Republic. Look, I'll freely admit that was a completely unnecessary invention that meant this game ended with Delis's goal being scored at the end of the first extra time period. However, to those that say, well, if only the Czech Republic had that extra 15 minutes, maybe they would have tied the game, maybe they would have taken the lead, maybe they win it in penalties. I mean, there are really two things that need to be addressed with that logic. First, the Czechs had 105 minutes to score and couldn't break down the Greek defense. Sure, there was some luck involved in that, but still. The second thing, though, is the marking from the Czech Republic on the corner kick, which they conceded the goal, was atrocious. The only person between Saritas taking the corner and Delis is Rosicky, not a player known for his defensive work. The marking, the defending on this corner kick should have never been allowed to happen by the Czech Republic. They only have themselves to blame for conceding that goal. That did not stop the anti-Greece sentiment. In fact, it was at a fever pitch ahead of the final. Only those with Greek ancestry wanted to watch the team play for 90 minutes, let alone win. You would be hard-pressed to find an underdog this hated. Even the perennially unloved Portugal went into the final as the so-called fan favorite. For some reason, they were also the favorites in the minds of sportsbooks and bettors and what have you, which I never really understood. Greece had beaten Portugal in the group stage. They had overcome all of these great teams, and yet everyone still thought Portugal was going to win, and fairly easily so. I don't even know what to say about the Euro 2000 final, apart from the fact it almost felt like a caricature of the Greek performances leading up to that point. They had taken their negative defensive soccer style to an almost absurd level for this matchup, and unfortunately, it worked. Portugal, like all of those before them, had no answers for Greece's marking and stifling defensive structure. Charistias popped up with a set-piece goal, and the rest, you can say, is history. I actually went back and watched this game in full, and let me tell you folks, it sucked. It sucked when it first happened. It's even worse today. It is brutal to watch. Then when you go back and look at the Greece 2004 roster, you quickly realize none of these guys went on to do anything of note in club soccer after this. What's more, the victory didn't do a hell of a lot for the long-term prospects of Greek football as a whole. Some 20 years after their European Championship triumph, they couldn't even qualify for Euro 2024, despite the fact this year's tournament has 8 more teams in it. Now, it hasn't been all bad for Topir Tico. They qualified for the World Cup in 2010 and 2014. They made it to the quarterfinals of Euro 2012. The less said about Euro 2008, the better though. Like all Greek tragedies, the protagonist of Euro 2004 is a very complex character. They won the tournament as a huge underdog. They're right up there with Leicester City as the unlikeliest of champions. But really, at what cost? Between Jose Mourinho and Otto Rehhagel, soccer in the mid-2000s would devolve into a brutal grind. Nothing but marking attackers into oblivion, occasional counterattacks, and nearly every side playing some form of the 4-5-1, 4-3-3 hybrid. Time has smoothed the rough edges of this historic side. Those who weren't around to watch the Greeks play 90 or heaven forbid more than 90 minutes of soccer with extra time don't necessarily understand what the experience was really like. Hell, if you check out the highlights, you may even fool yourself into believing Greece was just your typical underdog. But make no mistake, it was an underdog that was despised, an underdog no one ever wanted to see win. But it was also that fact that fueled the Greece side. If they weren't so disliked, who knows if they actually prevail? They needed that us against the world attitude. The champions of Euro 2004 Greece, they made winning ugly an art form. However, much like all ancient Greek art, it didn't quite stand the test of time, but remains important nevertheless. Thank you for watching this video. To learn more about bits and pieces of Euro 2004 you may have forgotten about, video lower right hand corner of your screen is the place to go. And if you would like to understand a little bit more about why USL may overtake MLS, or at least why fans are rejecting the MLS because of it, video upper right hand corner of your screen. Until next time, I am Shine Hollis. This is the Touchback, and as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.